Okay.
I've seen that. I thought Faith went through the three EQIs, but I only found pre. I only saw pre and post. So I don't know what happened to her EQI results.
Okay, so Faith and Precious were just mid and post. Now let me pull that up and see if maybe I logged that. Oh, I did have pre, and it should say mid. Okay. Let me just go. It should say mid and post. My apologies. I'm fixing it now. I had I had to change several things just to try to make them all consistent. Maybe I should shut my window. Hold on. Oh my goodness. We're having dirt brought in, and okay. So that is my mistake. It should be mid and post, so I will make that change throughout. Okay. So that will be. So does that make more sense now?
Yeah, it's better because I can be seeing pre, post, and
yeah.
Then with Precious, I could not really tell what brought about that drop.
Yeah.
Maybe, you understand?
Mm-hmm. I noticed that as well. And we can talk about each person separately, but I wanted to give you a chance to respond overall if there was anything,
Yeah, I think those are the only concern I had.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to make those changes now. So they're done. I had to make several changes throughout all of the spreadsheets. And I knew I'd miss something. So there was that. So both of those are done. Anything else just overall in regards to these that you saw or you had questions on in regards to maybe just the EQI or what something meant, any of the subscales or anything like that?
I was just impressed about the numbers that were from the mid. I look more into the totals.
Right.
I thought, yeah, the totals.
So you were looking.
Adela,
when you say the totals, are you referring to the overview worksheet, that first?
Yeah.
Okay. Just one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where for example, where Adela has a 96 at the pre, then 114 mid, then 116. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the changes were obvious, and
I don't put too much emphasis on the mid results. I like to pull the mid results just to see if there's any issues going on, because I know the mid results, if something is drastically wrong, it'll show up in the mid in comparison to the pre, So if someone plummets in mid from their pre score, I want to, that's a concern. But in the mid results, you basically want to see the same kind of consistency. They're either the same or slightly higher. They might be a little lower because they're starting to balance a little bit. But really, the focus is from the pre to the post, right?
Yeah.
So what I would like to do is pick one person and let's bring it up and let's talk about that person. And we have to do this for every single person. Okay? So you pick whoever you want to do first.
Yeah, I just pick them according to their names. I have Adela here, Brenda, Brendaline, Concelia. It's yeah.
Okay.
That's all that I have them on my sheet.
All right. So let's start with Adela. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I just want to notice her post, and we had added question 134 and 135, which was in regards to their physical health and their psychological health. So I'm just looking at what she wrote now in the paper form. I didn't look at it until just now, and she felt that she felt better physically and better psychologically. So when I look at her chart here in regards to her physical health and psychological health, it is consistent with what, and it supports what she has told us, right? She's feeling better. And looking at this chart in front of me, I would say, you know what? She went from pre to post. She gained about 7.6, a little over 7.5 percentage points in her physical well-being, right? And that's an overall number. And just so that I want to make sure that we're clear on this, in the Reuben Baran EQi before MHS took it over, right? Dr. Baran looked at a person's physical and psychological health in relation to their emotional and social wellness, well-being. And when he did that, he took the under physical health. You see those subscales: emotional self-awareness, problem solving, flexibility, stress tolerance, and optimism. Those were the five subscales that he took in order to determine whether they had better physical health or not. So when you see the 7.6, those are what is taken into consideration, those five subscales. However, originally, before MHS took over the EQi, originally he had considered happiness as a subscale. And then they changed it over where happiness is now just an indicator of wellness. So that's been changed from the original Baran EQi and the present day EQi. So I just wanted to add happiness in as a subscale to see where we would be if it made a difference. Okay. And that's where you get the 11 points higher. So if I take happiness into consideration, because I believe a person's happiness really leads to a person's better physical well-being. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I'm kind of like playing with this, right? And seeing. But look at the jump. It goes from 7.6 to 11 points. If which I found interesting. And then if we do the psychological health, again, Dr. Baran took 4 subscales, which were what is listed there: self-actualization, reality testing, flexibility, and stress tolerance. If I take those 4 subscales, Adela went up 17 points, right, in her psychological well-being, which is fabulous. Now, if I add a person's optimism, their outlook on life, which I believe really influences a person's psychological health and wellness, right? And I add in their happiness, right, as a subscale, it basically, for Adela, it basically mimicked 17.1, 17.2 increase, points of an increase, which I thought was kind of, interesting. So, thinking about this and thinking about Adela, can you notice when she first came in, did she, and to the point of when she left, the last day, even though we're still working with them, was there a physical difference, maybe in the way her body movements, her body behavior? Did she dress differently, more confidently? Did she, maybe her expression in her eyes or her face, did she come, can you just physically see that she was happier. It's almost kind of hard to separate a person's physical health and psychological health. Do you know what I mean? But I'm just wondering,
I understand. Well, from I will not be surprised at the skills I'm seeing here because they perfectly match what happened with Adela. When she came in, she was emotionally down there because a lot of things were going on around her. The father of the kids were shot to death, and crises here and there, sickness and so on. And as she kept coming, she found a family with us. Like in the report, we talked about having a safe space. The court provided a safe space for her for her healing, for rapid healing. So there was quite a good difference, even from her hair. If you look at the last photos we took, and if you could match the faces to the people or to the names, you find out that the changes are obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I found the physical changes amazing, and I know we talked about that a while back, several months back. But her psychological health, do you think this supports that she is feeling better, emotionally and
Yes, I would say she's feeling better because when she came, she could hardly express herself. She was always moody, sad, having something to talk about. But before she went out, she would open up, say a lot of things, and she was happy, and you know.
Okay.
She could give. There were times that she would come in and say things, some of our changes, and even give out a token to some of the court members.
All right, so then going back to the overview of results, where we have the 15 subscales plus the happiness indicator, wellness indicator. So the EQi now does not consider happiness a subscale. It's just an indicator of a person's, level of happiness, right? So when she started, and now remember that the average of the EQi is anywhere from 90 to 110. Okay, so that's if you fall within those limits, it's not that you're good to go. It's just that that would be an average or normal score, which is where you want someone to fall into. And then from there, look at it on a deeper level, go into the subscales a little bit more, and see where she might need, where she might be unbalanced or where she might need growth, right? So she came in, she docked in at 96. So at least she docked in where in the norm, right? And if you go and if you go through, her self-perception composite, she's at 99. And you look at the composites, right? So if you flick over to the chart that says balancing EQi, right, you'll see that I have the composites, the overall composites, right, listed there. Now, you want to be within a deviation of maybe 10, 15 points. And if you are, that says that it looks like you're pretty balanced, right? So if you look at the overall composites, you see that she's at 99, 96, 102. 87 takes a bit of a dip, and then 97. So if you add 10, so you take the lowest score, which is 87, you take the highest score, which is 102. Now, if you add 15 points to the 87, you get what? Like 102. So basically what we see is that, she's pretty well balanced. It looks like she's overall balanced in her overall composites, right? And then we look at her happiness indicator at 92. Again, she's falling within that 90 to 110. Now, the highest you can go is like about 132. So there's lots of opportunity for her in growth, right? So we're going to flick back to the overview worksheet. And now we're just going to go into those 15 subscales, right? So within the self-perception composite, you have self-regard, self-actualization, and emotional self-awareness. And if you notice, I have like a little asterisk on self-regard because I'm specifically looking at where she falls in self-regard. And then if you go down, you'll see 4 asterisks, right? Her assertiveness, her problem solving skills, and also where her optimism lies, okay? So when I look at this, I immediately look at the total EI, so get a baseline. Then I go to the 5 overall composites and look at that as a baseline. Then I look at her happiness indicator. And then I go into the asterisk subscales and I look at her self-regard. Now she's at 92, so she's in the norm. Assertiveness, she's 123, which is pretty high, which means that says to me in relation, it says to me that she might be a little too assertive. She might not be so offensive in how she is communicating. I don't know. I'm still looking at these other subscales. So then I go to problem solving. So you see she's at 84. So she's fallen under that 90 to 110. So that's a concern for me. I then go to optimism and I see 116. Now, I love to see a high optimism score because I truly believe that a positive attitude will bridge you through a lot of the crap in life. As long as it's not so high in relation to all the other ones, because I don't want someone to be so overly positive that they're not being, they don't have a sense of reality of what's going on. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so then I look at that, and now I'm going to look at where she was. I'm going to look at all the other ones: self-actualization, emotional self-awareness, and so on down the line. So when I look at the pre, and I look at this, I think to myself, decision-making composite is falling a little low, right? Which is something I've always felt. That's always been my hypothesis is that when people don't know how to problem solve correctly and in a balanced way, it kind of hinders them within their life, right? But that is also piggybacked really with a person's sense of self-regard and self-worth. If they don't respect themselves, I've seen, all kinds of great decision making or whatever. You're never going to see a high decision. I don't think. I never have yet, but I could be wrong. I don't think I'm ever going to see a high decision making composite and a low self regard score, because your decisions and choices really are anchored in how you respect yourself, right?
That's right.
So I look at all of that, and I think, and then when we get to the mid, right? So at the mid level, at 6 months, right, we pulled. So I see right now, she went from 96 to 114 and so on, right? So if you flick back to the balancing EQi and you see the overview of those 5 composites, you see she increased from 99 to 113, then she increased to 110 on the next one, 123, 109. Now, so her decision-making composite really spiked, which was great. Her stress management went up, and even her happiness indicator went up. Again, if you take the lowest score, which is 104, and you add 10 to 15 onto that, right? You're going to be, if you add 15, I mean, you're all within balance as it looks, right? It looks like you're balanced, okay? We then I'm going to go back to the overview chart, and I'm going to look at self-regard, right? And I'm looking at that 111, the 109, that in assertiveness. So she went down. She went from 123 down to 109. But if you look at the pre, you'll see in assertiveness, she was real high in regard to the 96, 98, and then independence was 75. So she was out of whack. So it makes sense that in the mid, the other couple went up and the assertiveness went down. She's finding balance. So that is saying to me that she's working really hard on understanding how she's being perceived and how to express herself in a non-offensive way, but in a constructive way, and in a way that is free from emotions. Okay. So then I go to problem solving and I see that she's increased a little bit, to 93. So, and then look at her reality testing spiked, her impulse control spiked. So these are slightly out of whack here, right? So I'm looking at them and I'm thinking to myself that now she's thinking she's gone a little too overboard with looking at things as they really are, the sense of reality. Maybe she could be thinking they're too positive or they're too negative. I don't really know. Okay, so that I'm just thinking in the back of my mind about that. You go down to the stress management composite and I look at optimism, and again, it spikes slightly. So then I look at the previous, right? So she went down in flexibility, up in stress tolerance, and then up in optimism. Again, so she's a little high in optimism. I'm and it kind of makes sense with the spike in optimism, the spike in reality, and it says to me she's got a really good outlook on life, and she's probably really thinking positive, and that the reality of the situation is going to end positive. That's my guess. Because I don't work with her, like, one-on-one like you do, I wouldn't know if that assumption or opinion or assumption was correct. So that I would like fall back to you with a question of thinking back to when she started to when she was at 6 months. Did you notice a sense of change in her outlook on life, and also understanding that perhaps that her outlook on life not only is positive, but there actually is a way to change it and make it better?
Well, from the very beginning when she came in, she's one of the people I've worked closely with. That is very open.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike Precious, that I cannot really say much about. Adela has been an open person, and she has been growing from strength to strength, like I can see.
Mm-hmm.
Things really change with her, particularly emotionally, and it's just that she stands a better position to say what went on in her.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a great change, and she has testified to that change, like a lot of them have testified.
Now, what is her age again?
Can that be 20? I don't have the chart here.
She has like a few kids, right?
Yeah, 3 kids.
Yeah, 3 kids. Isn't she like 29 or 30 or 31, around that age?
She should be around that age. I'm thinking of 29. I'm going to check after this.
Okay, so one of the things that if you could do for me is confirm ages. It's really important. Okay. You can confirm if you just tell me, if you can give me their birth date, I can figure it out myself with the year, But if you tell me their age, I'd like to know their age when they started, and then their age, at the post. And that'll give me an idea. Okay, so then under the interpersonal composite, right? I do look at that. I think it's really important that people understand um, the importance of mutually satisfying relationships and an ability to understand and have empathy for others, right? And also to have a social conscience of wanting to help community. So she has a pretty healthy overall score, right? She went from 102, then she jumped to 123, and she went from 100 under interpersonal to 113, empathy 118 to 129, social responsibility. See, she went from 83, which was a little under that 90, then she jumped to 115. So at mid level, she has a very good sense of community, a good sense of empathy, and she's really
That's right.
and
That's
she's
a perfect person.
yeah, and she's understanding the importance of mutually satisfying relationships. And
Yeah.
I would venture to say, and this would be a guess, but I would venture to say that in the beginning, she had under finding the cohort and feeling as though the cohort was family, right? After her husband was killed, she's at a lower level of happiness. After all that happened, maybe in the beginning she wasn't feeling as though she could make any changes in the community. Do you know what I mean? She totally understood how people were feeling, because how could you not? Um, and she understood the importance of a mutually satisfying relationship, and I think that's probably because she was married, she had a husband, she had 3 children, she was older, she had a greater sense of life experiences. So all of this makes sense to me. The only thing is that social responsibility had taken such a dip at the beginning, but that could really just be that she didn't know. She was probably just concerned about herself and taking care of her own kids and figuring out how to manage herself, right? So then at midpoint,
That's right.
and so at midpoint, she again jumps it. She realizes that, oh my gosh, I have help. I have community within this cohort, which is so important to me. And now I understand how to help others as well. It's not just about me, right? Um, so overall, at midpoint, I'm pretty happy with her scores. Her flexing, I look at her lowest score, which is flexibility, and then her stress tolerance is a little high. They don't really jive, but you know what? There's not. I don't want to push too much here. It looks like she has had major growth, really good growth, good balanced growth, right? So if we go back to the balancing EQi, right? Actually, I'm going to skip that until let's go back to the overview. And let's look at post. Where is she? So she ends up at total EI at 116. So she increased by 20 points. That's amazing. So she's actually over the norm, which is 90 to 110. So she's 6 points over the norm, which is great. Now remember, the hardest part about all of this is not to access and get to this higher, beyond at least norm or beyond the norm. The hardest part of this and the biggest challenge is to sustain it and to also influence continued growth. So while this looks great, you can't just rest on your laurels, right? Hopefully, she has been taught how to continue to work with these subscales in life so that she can continually maintain, sustain, and possibly grow as she continues on in life. So if we look at the 5 composites, let's go to balancing EQi again. And let's look at those 5 composites in comparison to each other. You see she's got 120, 120, 109, 113, 107, right? So the lowest one is 107. Even adding 10, 15 points, you're still all within what a sense of a balance within those composites. She's looking pretty solid. Now, she is spiked in self-perception and self-expression, which totally makes sense to me because she's never really probably felt as though she had a voice outside of her family, right? She has a voice with her children, she had a voice with her husband, but outside of that unit, perhaps she didn't feel, and that's probably why she came in at 99 and in the norm. She had that sense of knowing who she was. She's a mother, a wife, right? But with the Civil War and her husband being killed, it probably plummeted her scores a little. I bet you when her husband was alive and everything was great in your city in Northwest Cameroon, I bet you her scores would have been higher. But then all this crap happened, and I bet you they plummeted a little because now she's like, holy crap, I'm not just a mother. I'm no longer, I'm still a mother, but I'm not a wife, but now I'm the breadwinner. I've got to take care of the family. So there's a little bit of confusion here and self-expression. She probably understood her role as a woman, as a wife and as a mother, but now her husband is killed, and now she has to express herself as the head of the household, so to speak, you know. So she's kind of she's not sure really. I don't know, maybe she's never done it before. I'm guessing at all of this, you know. But I'm thinking to myself, you know, she's still got a good sense about her. But then at the end of this, she weighs in and scores in at 120. She's nailed it. She knows who she is. She knows how to now express herself in the roles, the differing roles that she plays, right? And she lives in. Her interpersonal went from 102 up to 123, which makes sense to me because she's in the cohort and she really understands how important it is to have mutually satisfying relationships, but it was also kind of really high. So now it's back down to 109. So I'm not that concerned about it. I kind of think it needed to level off. But I'm going to go into this a little bit more after I go through this with you, these 5. Now, her decision making goes from 87 to 109 to 113. It looks like she's on her way to really understanding how to make good choices in life, void of emotions and stuff like that. Her sense of reality is good, and so on and so forth. Her stress management goes from 97 to 104, 107. It's a steady pace. It might not seem like a lot. I mean, she went up 10 points, which is great. And then you go to her happiness indicator. You go from 92 to 111, and she ends at 120. Now remember, the norm is 90 to 110. So she is in her norm, if not higher, in several of these, right? So she came in probably feeling okay, you know, and I don't know if she was feeling okay. Her psychological and her physical health were at 97 and 91 or 96 and 95, about the same. So she was probably feeling okay. She wasn't great, but she was status quo. You know what I mean? Her children probably, if she didn't have children, she might not have been as happy, but because the children, she's probably feeling a sense of purpose because of the children and all of that. But then by the end, she really, it almost like she came in with a face without a smile, you know, just a you know, an expressionless face, and she left with a sense of happiness, a smile, and a sparkle in her eye. Do you know what I mean?
I understand.
What do you? I mean, what do you? I don't know if I've.
I mean, from the scores, like you said, from pre, she was not below. She was around the norms of 96. which indicated she could just be, had a little sense of hope because of children, and now she was progressing in the scores.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I say. I understand this her coming in where she
Mm-hmm.
was,
Mm-hmm.
having a face without a smile.
Mm-hmm. So if you look at just the subscales, right? And then, I mean, I'm sorry, excuse me, the composites. She looks pretty good. Going back to the overview at the post, self-regard, she went up 29 points in her sense of self-regard, which I think is amazing. And her self-actualization went up 18. Her understanding of her emotions pretty much stayed the same, which is okay. And if you look at all of those, I mean, she's pretty well balanced. It looks like she's pretty well balanced in her sense of self-perception. Going to the self-expression composite, you notice she went up 24 points overall, right? Her emotional expression, her constructive use of telling people how she feels actually went up 28 points. The way she communicates in a non-offensive way actually went down 11 points. So she's probably just kind of, it's like a tug and a pull and a tug of war, trying to figure out when she can maybe communicate in a more stern way and not in an offensive way. She might still be, playing with her boundaries there, and that makes sense to me. She, in her independence, went up 32 points from a 75 to a 107. She's made great strides here, right? Interpersonal composite went up overall 7 points. Her interpersonal relationships went down. Her empathy went down from her overall, and her social responsibility went up, right? So again, overall, she's basically in balance. It appears on paper that she's in balance here, right? She's doing good. She's really trying. You go down to the decision-making composite, she went up overall 26 points. Problem solving from 84 to 96, up 12 points. Her sense of reality went up 31 points. And her impulse control, her ability to either resist or delay an impulse to act off of emotions, right, increased 22 points, right? So overall, when you look at this, 106, so she's a little low. Her problem solving it's still in the norm, but in relation to everything else, it's lagging behind. Okay.
Remember you like mentioned that everybody had an issue with problem solving.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said so, and you said we could do an agenda for problem solving again because everybody was lagging behind.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe just hit it home, hit it out of the park when it comes to the problem solving. And I think that's going to help them because those are going to be skills that they can use over and over and over again forever in life, and that they can teach to their children, to their family members, anybody they come in contact with. Yeah. I mean, it's not this huge concern for me, but I'm just like, you know what? I feel as though it can be stronger. I feel as though
I think it's necessary because our entire lives are full of problems to solve. It's good to grasp that.
Yeah, I would agree. And if we look under stress management composite, she went up 10 points. The flexibility, right? The ability to adapt her emotions and her behaviors went up 24 points. And yet her stress tolerance went down and her optimism even went up, which is great news. But if you look at the 86, it's not, 86, 90, it's lagging behind again, right? So it's almost like that she is probably, and I look at assertiveness, her ability to communicate in a non-offensive way is 112. her independence, right, is 107. Her impulse control is 114, and her stress tolerance is 86. So it almost says to me that she's she's probably, I don't know really what's going on, because it's hard to gauge. I'd almost think though that she is just got a sense of whatever, who cares, I'm not going to stress over it, I'm not going to stress over it, you know what I mean, type of attitude.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
That's possible.
Yeah. And then under her happiness indicator, it goes up 28 points. Her which is wonderful to see. The girl is the girl. The young lady, the young woman is happy. She's optimistic. She's got a good sense about herself. She thinks highly of herself. Those three things are going to get her through. But if we could tack on a stronger score in problem solving, then I would know we could nail it out of the park, and she would have something to rest on. And if she can, I think that if her problem solving ability and skills increases, I think her stress tolerance is going to increase, because she's no longer going to just say, whatever, I can't do it, I can't, I'll let someone else do it, I'm not going to stress out of it. She's going to be able to take that under herself, her own wing, be able to figure it out for herself, so that she's going to have a more healthy level of stress tolerance. I mean, that's just my guess, only because of the opposing scores being higher. I could be wrong, and that's a question for her to say, what's going on? Are you stressed out, or are you not very stressed out? Because if she was really, really stressed out, I don't know. I don't know. So that's a question for her. So you want to make a note that when you meet with her, that you'd like to know just what's going on with her stress levels. Okay, so then under the balancing EQi, right? If you notice under self-perception, I have, and under all the 5, there's like 5 composites, right? You'll see some areas that are highlighted. So if you notice, problem solving is highlighted, stress tolerance is highlighted under the self-perception, right? So we already know that her problem solving isn't really in balance. And we also know that her stress tolerance isn't in balance. And if you look at this, it basically confirms those things. So, and then if you look under self-expression, her interpersonal relationships is a little low in relation to those other subscales, right? So it might be that, she's been spending a lot of time on herself, which is great. And maybe now she needs to venture out and spend a little bit more time on a relationship, whether it be with family or whomever, and not have it be so much about herself, but a little bit more of with that other person, and make sure that it's more given, tug and pull type of thing. It's mutually satisfying. It's not that this is a huge concern. I'm just saying that if we hit home the problem solving, I think the problem solving and the stress tolerance are going to become balanced. And I think eventually, as she moves through life, that her interpersonal relationships are also going to come higher and kind of eventually balance out. Now, if you look under the interpersonal, again, you can see that there's a little bit of like interpersonal relationships. I didn't highlight this because I wasn't really sure. So if you go, I'm going to highlight it now. Under interpersonal, the third block. So I would highlight interpersonal relationships. It's a little low, right? On the first block, you'll see interpersonal relationships is a little low, as well as problem solving is a little low. This whole thing is a little unwhacked, which just, again, I think if we work on problem solving, a lot of this is going to go away. Look under decision making, you see again problem solving, stress tolerance, things that are a little bit low in relation to all of the other scores. Stress management, again, we see stress tolerance, her interpersonal relationships. So these are the same things that we had talked about and that we kind of had an idea of by when we go back to the overview chart. These are some of the things that I talked about, right? And these are some of the things that I'm making these assumptions. But are my assumptions correct or not? That's when I go to the balancing EI chart and I look. Now, when I put all these numbers in, I didn't really, all I did was compare. I did the deviation of 10 to 15 points on these for the post, right? And I'm looking at post. I'm not looking at mid or pre, because in pre you can see that they're different. If you look at pre under self-perception, under the balancing EQi, they're intact. They're balanced. They're balanced. But but I'm looking specifically at post. And so my assumptions that I was making in the overview chart seem to hit it home here. So my assumptions seem to be correct. So when I see this and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so these are the questions I need to ask her, right? Problem solving, I'm not going to ask her too much about because I got to teach her those skills, and we're going to still teach her those skills, okay? But what's going on stress-wise? I need to know. And then what's going on with her interpersonal relationships? Is it that, she was really focusing on herself and she was putting herself first for a change, which is good. But now she needs to understand that, okay, now she can start looking at the other person and having good, mutually satisfying type of relationships. Do you know what I mean?
Well, when it comes to relationship, I think that she should have a problem there, because when everything happened last year when the husband died, she moved to her brother's house. So she's been living with brother and the children. They've been living under some kind of difficult situations, because that's not a house, that's not a home.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only place she goes to is goes to church, and sometimes comes to meetings where she can express herself and love. And the meetings are not very often, so I can say there's an issue there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, living with your brother, the brother's wife, sometimes she complains that it's not just going, things are not going the way ought to go. And I understand, because of the brother is now keeping a larger family than he used to keep.
Mm-hmm. Well, knowing that, I'd say that she's done extremely well. Knowing that she is living under circumstances where her sense of self, she was, she had her own household at one point, and now she's living under somebody else's. And yet she's still trying to maintain the role of head of household within her own family, even though they're living in the same house, right? So she's got this sense of she's trying to maintain her own sense of self, and a role with her children, while at the same time trying to live within or under her brother and sister-in-law's rules. So knowing all of that, and yet look at her scores. She's done really, really well. And it makes sense to me that she's really not, she went down a little in her interpersonal relationships, not a lot, 3 points, but it kind of makes sense, because she's not seeing probably a good relationship anymore between her and her brother, her and her sister-in-law. It's probably taken a slight hit, so to speak. And she probably feels as though, it's not mutually satisfying, because she's not necessarily that happy in that kind of a relationship. I'd say that she's still doing relatively well and managing it. Her stress is really low, and that could explain why her stress tolerance is low because she's relinquished. She has relinquished to this situation for now until she can figure it out, you know. But her sense of happiness up 28 points. It's amazing. I imagine she's feeling very thankful for being able to live with her brother and sister-in-law with this, but with the same understanding that, you know, it's not the best case scenario. She understands that, but she is grateful for the opportunity to be safe, her children to be safe. She's biting her tongue. She's doing what she has to for the sake of her children's safety and her own safety. But I would say that she's a woman who definitely needs to get out on her own and be able to take care of herself. And if she doesn't do it relatively soon, or something changes in the dynamics of her brother's household, that you might see a change in all of this, because you can only stay hopeful for so long. I mean, I imagine she'll always stay hopeful and optimistic, but it might take a hit, because after month after month after month, you know, it's like, geez, I thought I'd be out by now. You know, what's her plan? My question to her would also be, what's your plan of action? Do you have a plan of action? Do you have an idea of when you might want to get your own place? Can you financially handle it? What's going on? These would be all my questions. And we could be doing a problem-solving class in July in relation to a common challenge, which may be how I don't know, like how to move forward in whatever capacity they want to move forward in, you know. So what are your thoughts after I went through all of this?
Well, it's really something very professional. It's hard to see with your eyes, to understand with your mind, because you've been trained in it, and it's so amazing how you handle the points and correlate with reality.
But were they correct? The assumptions that I made?
That's what I'm saying. The assumptions are quite they tie to their real life, because I'm here with their real life, and you are far away, but you're giving me just the reality of what is on ground. So I'm thinking that it's professional. Just like a doctor would diagnose and say, this pain is coming from here, this one is coming from here, and so on.
Okay. So, anything else in regards to Adela?
Well, I don't think there's something much.
Okay, because I'm videotaping this and our conversations on a per cohort member. So I'm going to stop the video now.